I'm Hugh Hewitt. United States Senator Tom Cotton joins us. Good morning, Senator Cotton.
Good morning, Hugh. It's good to be back on with you. Glad to
Uh,
hear that you've played some classic rock this morning as bumper music and not the endless loop of the Browns' last-minute kick over the Panthers. I had enough of that yesterday.
let's play that for Senator Cotton since he brought it up. Cut number 11, please. Yes, cut number 11, Jacob. They're on strike. They're on strike. They won't play it for you. Senator Cotton, I want to compliment you on the American Workforce Act, but I'm going to come back to it. I also want to compliment you as being the first person on the Hugh Hewitt show to say that the Ukrainian war will prove that infantry remains indispensable. Your thoughts on the Ukraine advance, as well as, please, whether or not we ought to do what Nixon did in '73 with Israel, send everything that can fly to the Ukrainians and resupply.
Well, it's certainly been a lightning advance in northeast Ukraine over the last 4 or 5 days. I went back and read some news reporting, and as late as Thursday night, Hugh, most Western news sources were still focused on the southern offensive around Kherson, just north of Crimea. So the Ukrainian armed forces did an outstanding job of achieving tactical surprise. And through combined arms maneuver warfare, infantry, armor, artillery, as well as effective use of some airstrikes, they've been able to seize territory. I think now we're up to almost the size of Connecticut that they've reclaimed of their own land in northeastern Ukraine. And critically, they've seized some logistics hubs, places like Izium, that were not just important in their own right, but for the supply lines they provided to Russian troops throughout eastern Ukraine. And I think it just goes to show that the policy of equipping Ukraine to defend itself and to fight its own war has been succeeding. I wish the Biden administration had started it before this war began. It might have forestalled the war from happening in the first place or shortened it from the very beginning. But as you alluded to, what Nixon did in 1973, we need to keep the supply lines flowing to Ukraine so they can continue to defend their own territory, which, as we've seen, they're not only willing to do, but they are more than able to do.
Now, Senator Cotton, I'm reminded, of course, of the Battle of the Bulge, where Germans rallied to push the American troops back in December of 1944 around the Ardennes. Are you worried that Ukraine will become overextended at this point and be susceptible to the Russian counterattack of their counterattack?
It's always possible, and even when we're lauding the Ukrainians for these gains in the last 4 or 5 days, we should remember 4 or 5 days does not make a war. There are ebbs and flows. But at this point, it looks like the Ukrainian general staff, down through privates on the front lines, are working in a fairly methodical way to solidify those ground lines and make sure that they're not overextended in that fashion. And again, we're talking about significant areas, amounts of terrain, something almost the size of Connecticut, but we're not talking about something the size of the Western Front in World War II. So I think the Ukrainians will, before the winter freeze begins to set in, be able to not only to extend their gains further, but also consolidate them.
Now, the silver medalist columnist at the Washington Post, second best columnist at the Washington Post, Henry Olsen, he's actually tied for, there are two people on the silver platform, Mark Thiessen and Henry Olsen. He wrote a column yesterday that surprised me. I was unaware of Tom Cotton's American Workforce Act. I'm feeling a little bit second-class citizen here because you come on here every week and you hadn't mentioned the American Workforce Act to me. But a good idea whose time has come. The last line of Henry's column is, Cotton's American Workforce Act is an idea that's time has come. Let's hope other Republicans see the light. And indeed, it is compelling. Tell people what it is.
Well, Hugh, one reason you may not have heard about it is that we introduced it last week, I think on Thursday to be exact. And the news of Her Majesty's death on Thursday drowned out a little bit what was happening in the United States Senate. But the bill is designed to provide similar kinds of public support for America's workers who are not going to go get a 4-year degree, maybe not even get a 2-year degree, and they don't need one to lead successful, prosperous lives and contribute meaningfully in their local economy. So it would create a new program that would give a kind of federal voucher up to $9,000 for these prospective workers who can go and get training on the job in the workforce for the skills in their local economy. So in South Arkansas, for instance, it might be in the oil fields, or it might be in timber mills. In Northeast Arkansas, it might be at one of our big steel mills. And it's going to be employer-driven, so it's obviously going to be directly relevant and useful. And then it'll allow also those employers to gain some public support for creating these programs that, again, would be for the high-paying jobs they have, almost as much as median income in the region. And then if they hire them, they'll have incentives to keep them on and hire them as the training cycle comes to a conclusion. And it shouldn't add anything to the deficits that we've been running. One way that we would be funding it is through a 1% tax on the fair market value of these huge endowments that colleges have been running up for decades, billions and billions of dollars. I think it's past time that we begin to support all the young men and women across America who aren't interested in college. They don't need the skills that college teach to succeed, but they do need help. In the same way that we help kids go to college, we should help kids get this kind of critical skills education for their local economy in the workforce.
I hope that the 1% tax on endowment, and I think that's a fine idea, excludes all institutions that have rejected federal money for decade after decade, like Grove City and, of course, Hillsdale, because the people who are part of the problem here are Harvard. Your and my alma mater has got $40 billion of endowment, and a 1% a year ticket is a great idea, by the way. Let me go back and ask. I immediately thought of my son James's buddy from high school who got his high school diploma and promptly went off to the BMW training center in God knows where on the Canadian border. I mean, it was way up there. And you 6 months learning how to be a BMW mechanic. And the young man loved cars and he loved BMW. So he's still working away 15 years later and he's making a good wage. But it costs money to go to the BMW Academy. Would it cover something like that?
Yeah, that's the kind of thing it's designed to cover, Hugh, is workers who have, maybe a specific job in mind, maybe in a specific employer in mind, helps defray the cost of that employer training those potential workers who don't have the skills necessary to engage in what is often high-tech, highly skilled work, even if you don't need 4 years, of general education at a 4-year college to get it. So it would both defray the cost on the front end and then also give employers incentives to then hire those people into their full-time workforce on the back end.
This is also a national security thing. I can hear Captain Jerry Hendricks, the naval strategist, and Captain Mark Vanderoff, who is our friend who is running the Constellation shipyard up in Green Bay, saying shipyard workers, skilled electricians, people who can build boats and ships, it would actually help remedy a critical shortage in skills-based defense suppliers.
Yeah, it would, Hugh. And again, it's also heavily localized, too, because it's tied to your local workforce. I mean, we do need many more employees in our shipbuilding industry. Not going to be a big source of jobs in Arkansas, I'm afraid. However, there's been some recent news coverage of the Highland Industrial Park down in South Arkansas and Camden, where so many of the missiles and rockets or their components that are being used by Ukraine's army right now have been built. One challenge that they've had in Camden, though, for years are getting those skilled workers. And again, this is the kind of program that would allow workers in South Arkansas to take this voucher and go to, say, Lockheed Martin or go to Raytheon and learn those skills while the employer is defraying the cost, and then they get hired full-time where they have a job that might pay 2 or 3 times what the average income is in South Arkansas, that is in high demand and that is going to give them a great chance for success in life.
My last question, I could bring up Arkansas State and Ohio State, but I'm a gentleman, so I won't. I want to know where the American Workforce Act idea came from, because one of the problems in D.C. is unless an idea has been on the shelf for 25 years, it doesn't move quickly. Who came up with this? Who did you talk about with it? What economists did you bring in? I mean, where did the idea come from?
Well, Hugh, it's been something that's on my mind for a while. 4-year degrees are good for a lot of young kids. You got one, I got one, a lot of our listeners did. But for many kids, probably more kids, it's not the right thing. And I've seen how much federal spending is directed towards those institutions, often without increasing job prospects and just contributing to more inflation in colleges and universities. And it's been a desire of mine to try to find a way to direct more of that money towards the kinds of job skills that our young Americans need. We worked with an organization called American Compass. It's not, as you say, it's something that's been around for 25 or 75 years. They've got a lot of good creative scholars there, and they helped us craft this bill in conjunction with some of my great staff. And like I said, I think it's going to be something that, if we implement it, will contribute a lot to all the Americans who don't want to go to college or for whom college might not be the right fit.
This is an unqualified great idea. I congratulate you. Got co-sponsors yet, Senator Cotton?
Still working on that, Hugh. It may be a while to condition the senators in both parties to think something beyond more money for 4-year colleges, which in the end probably is going to be more inflation. But this is the kind of bill that I think would be broadly popular across the country once people realize what it can mean for them and for their future.
This is a very, very good idea, and Republicans ought to rally around it, as should Democrats. Senator Tom Cotton, thank you for joining me. Sorry about Arkansas State, but you really don't want to mess with the Buckeyes in football season, Senator.
Well, I appreciate your condolences, Hugh. I'm sure they're heartfelt.
Thank you, Senator. Let me tell everyone, not only is Senator Cotton's American Workforce Act a good idea, so is the Job Creators Network. They'll love that, by the way. I've got to tell Alfredo Ortiz, who's president of the Job Creators Network, a great sponsor of the show, that Senator Cotton has got the American Workforce Act out there.